Well, our thanks as always to Home Street Bank for their support of this podcast. If you're looking for a bank that has it all, great people, great service, great rates, this is the place for you. This is my lender of choice. It should be yours as well. Go to homestreetbank.com. It's your one-stop shop for all your banking needs, both business and personal. That's homestreetbank.com. What if I told you that when you make a decision might be the most important factor in your success? We're going to talk about that today on The Buyer's Mind.
Welcome to The Buyer's Mind, where we take a closer look deep inside your customer's decision-making mechanism to reverse engineer the perfect sales presentation. Now, please welcome your host, Jeff Shore.
Well, welcome everyone once again to The Buyer's Mind, where we investigate the way that customers make purchase decisions. And man, do we have a show for you today. The one and only Daniel Pink is going to join us shortly. The man is a living legend and one of the smartest guys you'll ever meet. He has a new book out called When: The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing. I received an advance copy and I absolutely devoured that book. And today I'm thrilled to have Dan Pink on the show. As always, I'm thrilled to have our show producer, Paul Murphy, on the show as well. Murph, what do you think? I know you. We're both big fans of Dan Pink. You excited?
I'm very excited. He's a guy that keeps hitting on some very interesting topics. So this new book, When, I'm very curious to see where this goes.
It's going to blow your mind, and I'm looking forward to talking to him because, again, I have read the book, and there are things that have just really already had a strong impact on some of my day-to-day routines. And we're going to look at it from that perspective, but we'll also look at it from the perspective of when your customer makes decisions and when the right time for them to do that is. So we'll dive into that. I think we're going to love it. Let me give you your quote of the day. This is from Scott Adams, and he says, "Your best work involves timing. If someone wrote the best hip-hop song of all time in the Middle Ages, he just had bad timing." And I want to suggest you here, don't think of your failure as being bad ideas. Don't think of your lost sales as something you did wrong. I mean, it's possible, but give yourself a break. Sometimes the timing just isn't right. The key is to keep having ideas, to keep pursuing sales for when the timing is right. Because one thing I can tell you about winners are persistent. They keep plugging away with the behaviors that are proven to have that positive effect over time. That timing issue is something we oftentimes can't control. It's not always the right time for a customer to buy. But if we stay with the course, if we continue to do the things that we know are going to make us successful, you're going to get way more than your share of sales. Hey, if you want to think about improving in one key skill in 2018, that should be closing. Closing is the most important skill that we can obtain and improve upon as a salesperson. It's got to be your number one focus in the new year. And my book, Closing 2.0, will show you just how to do that. It will give you both the mindset and the technique to be effective at this very, very important time in the sale, but always, always with a customer-first approach. Visit jeffshore.com/closing and get your copy today. Let me give you our sales tip of the day, absolutely consistent with what we're going to hear about from Dan Pink here shortly. What is the timing for your most effective prospecting call? And I want to suggest that the answer probably should be early in the day. Why? Well, three things actually. First of all, listen to Dan Pink and see what he has to say. Secondly, if you get your prospecting calls done early in the day, there's a whole day of success reflection for you. You can look at you and say, that was uncomfortable, but I did it. I got it out of the way. This is the eat that frog philosophy. If you've never read Brian Tracy's excellent book, Eat That Frog. What did I do? I took the difficult task and I got it done early and I feel great all day long. Oh, there's a very tactical benefit here too, and that is that there's a whole day for a prospect to ponder and reconnect with you before they have a whole night to sleep on it and then forget about you. If you're thinking about your prospecting calls, my advice to you, do them early. Well, I first came across Daniel Pink when I read the book Drive, about motivation and what motivates us. And of course, there's a very, very popular, one of the most popular TED Talks ever on that subject. And then when he came out with To Sell is Human, I was all over it. Of course, it's my favorite subject. But now the new book, When, The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing. Very, very excited. Please welcome to the Buyer's Mind, Daniel Pink. Dan, how you doing?
I'm good, Jeff. How you doing?
Good. So let's get to the genesis of this here. You wrote A Whole New Mind about creative thinking. You wrote Drive about motivation. You wrote To Sell is Human about sales. And now When, all about timing. First of all, how do you decide what subject you're going to tackle?
Oh man, that's a long and tangled story. But the gist of it is, I really look at what I'm curious about. Writing a book is very, very difficult. Even if I've been doing it for a long time, and every book is for me at least, is extraordinarily difficult to put together. And so you have to pick a topic that you're genuinely interested in, that you want to live with for years and years and years and years. And that's ultimately what led me to this particular book, When. I realized that I was making all kinds of when decisions in my own life. Mm-hmm. Everything from when in the day should I work out, when in the day should I do my writing, when in the year should I set new goals, when during the course of a project should I consider abandoning it, over and over and over again. There wasn't any kind of systematic resource out there to help me make those decisions. I started looking into the science of this. It turned out there was a gargantuan amount of science about this, sprawled all over the place. But ultimately, to give a very long-winded answer to your otherwise clear and concise question, I wrote this book because I wanted to read it. And no one else had written it, so the only way to read it was to write it myself.
Got it. Makes perfect sense. When we think about the work that you've done up to this point, is there a through line of the body of work that you've produced, or is it just, okay, I'm not going to stop thinking about motivation. I'm not going to stop thinking about sales.
Yeah.
I'm just going to start thinking about this over here.
Yeah. It's not as if I abandon my interest in those other topics altogether. Again, I'll leave the question about whether there's a through line to readers. Mm-hmm. Maybe they see something that I don't. I truly just try to follow my curiosity and try to produce a book that is interesting and also somewhat useful to people.
Right.
But again, and I tend to do a lot of extrapolating from my own experience because I don't think I'm that special. So if I find a topic interesting and I find the insights useful in my own life, I feel like, hey, chances are other people will too. So that's really, there isn't a lot of strategizing about where to go next or anything like that. It's much more mundane than that.
The level of research, though, that goes into the book, and I didn't find it cumbersome as far as reading through the data, but the level of detail was amazing. And yet I have a sense that there was a whole lot of data that was left on the cutting room floor for this book.
Absolutely. I mean, the key, so much of writing, so much of anything is, that makes something great is what do you leave out? Mm-hmm. And I appreciate you're saying that, Jeff. I really do, because this was an enormous amount of research. So much so that for the first time, I had to enlist basically 1.5 research assistants to help me track through these studies, because I look at studies in, psychology and economics where, I actually have, some decent familiarity. But then I was in, a lot of stuff in biology mm-hmm. and endocrinology and anesthesiology. And I'm reading through these things and I don't even understand what half the words mean.
Right.
And then the other, one of the people who was helping was a fellow who's now a PhD student at Duke. A lot of this research is coming from it's fascinating analysis of big data, but a lot of the math and statistical techniques were over my head. So I had to bring in this guy to explain it to me. But he ended up, basically a conversation went like this: explain to me what's going on here. Okay. Explain it again. Okay. Explain it again. Okay, explain it one more time. And so it was very laborious.
Yeah, yeah. I look at what I'm trying to do here, even on this podcast. I'm trying to take the body of work that's been done in the academic world to try and make it approachable to practitioners every day. It sounds like that's really what you've tried to do, not just with this book, but with all of your books. The science is out there. How do we translate that into something that anybody can digest?
That's right. And especially in this book, because there was so much science out there, and so little of it was harvested. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you notice about academic researchers is that they're very siloed. So it's not only that the psychologists aren't talking to the economists, it's that the macroeconomists aren't talking to the microeconomists, mm-hmm. and the developmental psychologists aren't talking to the personality psychologists. Mm-hmm. Then when you start noticing, wait a second here, the sociologists analyzing 500 million tweets for their emotional content, and these chronobiologists who are, waking people up in the middle of the night, and these big data analysis of what's going on in hospitals. Hey, wait a second. They're all kind of asking similar questions. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm trying to spare the reader from reading all that stuff and trying to say, okay, here's the point. Here's what all these people are asking, and here's the answers that they're finding.
We're talking to Daniel Pink, author of the brand new book, When: The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing. Dan, I was surprised to see how much of this book dealt with the physical and even the anatomical nature of decision making. Did you think going in that was going to be the case?
That's a great question, Jeff. I think I was surprised by that. And that's one of the things that made doing it challenging, because I'm not a physician, I'm not a biologist. And so I really spent a lot of time trying to track that through. One of the things, though, in any domain of our behavior that we sometimes overlook, how do we make better timing decisions? But how do we do anything? I mean, we are biological creatures. Mm-hmm. That is, some of what we do and how we do it, and as I argue in this book, when we do it, is a product of our biology. And certainly in this book, if you think about the hidden pattern of the day that I write about, a lot of that is driven by our hormones, by our body temperature, by other distinctly biological features.
Some of the things you write about are downright scary. The timing of a colonoscopy certainly stuck out in my mind. What are some of the things that really surprised you the most when you were researching the book, and really just sort of grabbed you emotionally? You knew you were going to put it in the book because it really spoke deeply to you.
Well, I mean, that's, because everybody loves talking about colonoscopies. Let's talk about colonoscopies here. There's some incredible research about healthcare in the afternoons. The afternoons turn out to be this Bermuda Triangle of our days. So if you look at colonoscopies, doctors on average find 1/2 as many polyps. Those are the growths that colonoscopies are supposed to detect. Doctors find about 1/2 as many colonoscopies in afternoon exams as they do in morning exams, even with the same population. You look at anesthesia errors. Anesthesia errors are 3 times more likely at 4 in the afternoon than they are at 9 in the morning. You look at incidents of hand washing by medical professionals. It's already terrifyingly low, but if for physicians and nurses who start in the morning, hand washing deteriorates significantly when you get to the afternoon. You look at the prescribing of unnecessary antibiotics. Doctors far more likely to just say, "Oh, the heck with it. I'm just going to give you an antibiotic, even though it's a viral ailment." And this had a profound change on my behavior, in that I will not let my elder daughter last year had to have her wisdom teeth taken out, and I said, Sophia, you're getting the first appointment of the day. You are not going under anesthesia in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And the same thing is true with any kind of serious medical visit of myself or people in my family. I will not go to the hospital or to the doctor in the afternoon.
You focus a great deal on how we know ourselves. That's really, I think, a theme of all of your books. Do you worry at all about overplaying the hand on these things? It's sort of like, oh no, I'm a lark, so if my boss asks me if I want a promotion, but it's 3 p.m, I better think about that for a while. Is there a chance that we could get too analytical about the things that you bring up here?
I think there's a chance. I think that what we can do is Yeah, I think we can go overboard in any regard. I'll see you and raise you an even bigger point. If you think about books in general, certainly books in this genre, I don't think that any reader should take a single book as her single guide to life. What I do as a reader is I look at many, many books and pluck out the elements that are right and fashion it into something of my own. And so if you think about this question of timing, I'll give you a good factoid about this. Time of day. Okay, so I talk about things beyond time of day, but time of day explains about 20% of the variance in human performance on cognitive tasks. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean that timing is everything, but it means that it's a big thing. And so if you focus only on timing, if you focus only on your when decisions and not your how, who, or what, or why, that's not very good. But what we have right now is the opposite problem, in that people take what they do very seriously. They focus on how they do it. They think about who they're going to do it with. They are increasingly focusing on why they're doing it in the first place. But these questions of when they're going to do it are second order questions. They're we've sort of put the when questions and sat them over at the kids' table. And my argument is that they belong at the grown-ups table, because they have a material effect on our mood, a material effect on our performance, a material effect on our happiness.
This is, let me test you on this one here for just a moment, because one of the things that I have found, it was some advice that I actually got from a coach that I've worked with in the past. But if I'm grinding away on a Friday afternoon and boy, I got a problem that's just really gripping me and I just cannot figure it out, because I am a type of person, I take Saturday and Sunday off. I just do. And, I love it. That's my life. Okay. And then I approach that same problem Monday morning and go, what was I worried about? This is easy. Do this and this, and then we're done. What's happening right there?
Well, one of the things you're seeing there in a pretty dramatic way is the importance of breaks on our performance. And, I wish I were as enlightened as you. And this is another area where I've changed my behavior. I was always inclined to power through. So, especially at the unit of a day, but even at the unit of a week, and, can't sacrifice taking off a weekend, taking off Saturday and Sunday. I got to keep powering through today. And in chapter 2, I write about the emerging science of breaks, which has really changed my view of it. In some way, it's changed my view. And I'm hoping that readers who look at that chapter will change their view in much the same way that I think that society has changed its view about sleep. 15 years ago, somebody who pulled all-nighters, who came into the office and said, I only got 2 hours of sleep last night, was seen as a hero.
Right.
Now we have this, the science of sleep tells us, whoa, wait a second, that guy is doing something pretty stupid. He's hurting his performance. He might be hurting our performance. And I think the science of breaks is where the science of sleep was 15 years ago, that it's about to break through the surface. What the science of breaks tells us is that they're not nice to have. They're essential in our productivity, our creativity, and our well-being. And we have to start thinking of breaks as part of performance, not a deviation from performance, not as a concession to our weakness, but as an integral part of how we do good work. And the science is also giving us some interesting lessons about what kinds of breaks are the most effective, the most restorative.
Along those same lines, then, tell us how you're doing when it comes to your newfound joy of napping.
Yeah, so I was never much of a napper. I would take naps, and I always hated myself afterwards because I felt like garbage. And I realized that I was doing it wrong. That if you look at the research on napping, what it suggests is that there is an ideal length for a nap. And believe it or not, it's 10 to 20 minutes. To me, that doesn't seem, wait, how can that possibly be right?
It's not even worth it, right?
Yeah. The science is very, say that again.
It feels like it's not even worth it. Like, why bother if I'm going to sleep for 10 to 20 minutes?
Right. And what the research shows is, and I have an awesome chart in the book about this, is that when we sleep past a certain point, beyond 20, 25 minutes or so, we start to accumulate what's called sleep inertia. That is the groggy, boggy feeling we have when, at least I had when I woke up from naps. It takes us a while to shake that off, And so you start at a negative before you get any positive benefits of the nap itself. But with a 20-minute nap, a 15-minute nap, you can get all of the benefit with none of the negative. And so I now have become an aficionado of what is known as a nappuccino. And a nappuccino is this. You have a cup of coffee, you down a cup of coffee, then you go take your nap. You find a quiet place, maybe put in some I put in earplugs. I often put on an eye mask. I set my phone alarm for 23. I set it for 23 minutes. I like prime numbers. So set it for 23 minutes and do a countdown timer and then sit back, lie back. And it's amazing how quickly we can often fall asleep. And just having that nap of a relatively short duration, you wake up and you're much more alert. You're much more restored. And since it takes about 25 minutes for caffeine to get into our bloodstream, at the moment you're waking up, that caffeine is beginning to kick in. So I have become a devotee of the nappuccino.
I have to tell you, I was downright excited when I read that part of the book, Dan, and I did it. Because I'm like you, I'm not a napper because I'm used to the negative effects. I was so related to everything you were talking about, but I did it. I had a cup of coffee, I lied down, and man, I felt great the rest of the day. It was fantastic. So thank you for that insight. That's fantastic. You made a whole lot of new fans when you wrote To Sell is Human, and many of those fans are in our audience right now. It's a book that we've referenced many times on this podcast. Can you marry the concepts together? To Sell is Human, directed a little bit more towards the salesperson. When is more about the customer and maybe the decisions that they have to make?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think we can merge them, triangulate them. If you think, and I think that there are lessons in the book for salespeople. Well, one of them is that all times of day are not created equal. And so you have to actually think about time of day, at least in part, when you reach out to your prospects. One of the things that we know, and again, there's some great research, big data research, a lot of it, as I mentioned earlier, looking at, literally hundreds of millions of tweets, is that people are generally in a better mood in the morning. Their mood then dips in the afternoon and then begins to recover late in the day. And so if you're doing your sales calls during that afternoon dip when people's mood is down, you're going to have a less receptive audience. So time of day matters a lot on even when in the day you make those sales calls. There's a lot of decision making in general, but also in terms of buyer decision making, something obviously that you work a lot on. Well, a lot of the decision making that we make, a lot of the decision making has to do with, we often come to the encounter with what's essentially our default decision. And our default decision is generally not to do anything, not to change, not to do anything. And there's some good research showing that people are more likely to overcome that default during, for most of us, people who are larks or in the middle, in the mornings rather than in the afternoons, but also very interesting, after breaks rather than before breaks. So, going in and making a sales call after someone has taken a break can actually be quite effective. If you think about people's willingness to change, and at some level, when you go to your prospects, you're trying to change their behavior. People are much more open to change at certain what are called temporal landmarks, which are certain dates on the calendar that operate, as some researchers at Wharton have told us, as fresh start dates. So if you're really seeking big behavior change, you're more likely to get it on a Monday rather than on a Thursday, on the first of a month rather than on the 19th of a month, on the day after a federal holiday rather than the day before a federal holiday.
It seems to me, too, that just the very length of the sales conversation is going to be an issue as well. I think most sales professionals are looking to say, well, I don't know if I want to take a break, and that might actually cause the customer to rethink and say, boy, I want to sleep on it a little bit. But as it is, if we just grind through a presentation that goes on for too long, they're not going to make that decision anyway because they're mentally exhausted.
Yeah, and there's some great research, and it's in the book on judges. I mean, there's a
that was downright scary to me right there.
I agree with you. Yeah, it's very scary. I agree with you. I think it's very terrifying. There's a study of judges in Israel. it's pretty, it's one of those studies that has gotten a little bit of attention. Mm-hmm. And what it shows is that judges are much more likely to give a prisoner parole after that judge has taken a break than before that judge has taken a break. So literally the random assignment of who appears before the judge when, or how long the previous cases have taken, can determine whether, and the difference is massive. The difference is sometimes, you may have roughly a 3 times greater chance of getting parole if you appear after the break rather than before. I find that terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're just about out of time. Are you already mulling over a list of topics for the future? If the pattern holds true, you're going to be next talking about, I don't know, how we pick friends, why we hate vegetables, why nations go to war. I have no idea where you're going next, Dan.
You know what? Neither do I. It's probably not going to be why people hate vegetables, because I actually like vegetables.
Okay, all right.
So I probably would rule out that one.
Yeah.
But, one of the things about my work style, for better or worse, is that, some people are a mix of things. Like you have people, in terms of chronotype, some people are larks and some people are owls, but most people are kind of in the middle. Mm-hmm. And that's where I am on that. Mm-hmm. If you think about like introversion, extroversion, some people are very strong introverts. Some people are very strong extroverts. But a lot of us are ambiverts. Mm-hmm. We're kind of in the middle. That's where I am. But when it comes to things like tortoise and hare, I'm an extreme tortoise. I am the slowest moving, most methodical person around. I aspire to be a hare, but I have never been able to do it. So I will just tortoise my way to the next topic. But of course, I'll let you know, Jeff.
Yeah, please do. It seems to me that if somebody asked me, describe Dan Pink, what is the guy like? And tell me if you would agree with this. I would look at it and say, when you look at the gene that creates curiosity, Daniel Pink just got way more than his share. Is that a fair way to look? You're just the most intensely curious person I think I've ever come across.
You're very. Assuming that curiosity is a virtue,
it is indeed. Yeah.
You're a very kind. You're a very kind person to say that. I consider myself a very fortunate person because I do like to find out stuff, and somehow I stumbled into a way to pay my mortgage and give my kids winter coats by finding out stuff, writing it, talking to people who are interesting, asking them questions, writing it down, and then they put my name on it and they pay me. Mm-hmm. And, that's a pretty good gig. I feel like I'm going to get found out soon, but for now, it's a pretty good gig.
Stay with it. The author is Daniel Pink. The book is When: The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing, available right now. I got to tell you, I could not put it down. Amazing book, and I really do feel like I'm a better person for having read it. Dan Pink, thanks for being on The Buyer's Mind.
Jeff, it was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So there you go, Murph. I told you it was going to be epic. Was it not epic?
It was epic. He's an amazing guy. Very interesting how he picks his topics, isn't it?
It really is. And I love how he picks his topic. He says, I look at what I'm curious about. That's not just good for an author. That's good for life, right? It's just a more interesting life when you are very curious about the things that you're looking at.
Well, and the topics really, they apply so practically to life. When do you have surgery? When do you get a colonoscopy? How to take a nap? I love the Nappuccino. That was brilliant.
And I have tried the Nappuccino, and it definitely works. And that was my problem. It cured me. I rarely took naps, but when I did, I was napping for too long, and it was just killing me. Yep. And so he says, just take that quick nap. Although, if you're hanging out in a sales office somewhere, I do not recommend this. I just want to make sure we're very, very clear on that. I love the idea that there are huge amounts of science that went into his book and his study, but he does a nice job of making it so approachable and down to earth. Was that just me, or did you find it the same way?
No, absolutely. And I think that's what most of our audience would really like, is the fact that it is so approachable.
Yeah, the one thing that I really was thinking about as I was talking to Dan Pink and as I had been reading the book is not so much what happens for us as sales professionals, but what happens to our customers. And the fact of the matter is that our customers have a better time of day to make decisions, and our customers struggle with weariness. They struggle when things drag on and on and on. And I know for some of us who are listening right now, it's a complex process. It's a complex decision process. It's a complex purchase process, contract process, whatever that's going to be. And man, there's an argument here that your customer needs a mental break, that they need that opportunity just to be able to relax just a little bit. And if you have a say as to when you're going to be talking to a customer and when you're going to schedule an appointment, especially an appointment where you believe that that final decision is going to be made, it might be in your best interest to really think about that customer and look at who they are. It might mean that you're better off scheduling that appointment for first thing in the morning than you are for 2:30 in the afternoon when our normal circadian rhythm finds its ebb, or maybe even later in the evening for those owls who just do their best thinking a little bit later on in the evening. But we can look at this for ourselves, and I want to recommend that you do that. Buy the book and study it for yourself. It will make you a more productive person. It'll make you a more effective person. That's all good. But as you're reading it, as I did, keep one eye out on how this is affecting your customer. And if you see your customer in a sales presentation and their eyes are glazing over, I know that we always tend to look at it and go, well, boy, I don't want to short circuit the sales process and call a halt to it. And yet there are times if you're going to lose your customer, they might just need a little refreshing break, a little mental recreation, that time to step aside even for just a moment. And you give them an assignment and you give them something really fun to be thinking about in the meantime. But be thinking about that and how that question of when, that timing question, affects not just you, but affects your customer. So there's one last thing here in regards to our conversation with Dan Pink. I love the idea that what makes Dan Pink successful is that he is an insanely curious individual. And I want to just encourage all of you with that. I think of curiosity as not as a character trait, but more like a muscle. It can be grown. It can be developed. And as you become more curious about one thing, you become curious about other things. I'll give you an example of this. Every now and then, I will hop on Wikipedia. Okay, and I'll type in just something completely random. I'll do this just as a curiosity exercise. I will type in the Yucatan Peninsula, or I'll type in the Reformation, or I'll type in China in the 1900s, or whatever it is. I'll type in behavioral economics. It could be something that you're really interested in, or it could be something that you know nothing about. But then what I will do is I will scan a Wikipedia article and I'll find an interesting link. I'll say, I don't really know that term, or that might be it. What is that? And it'll lead me to something else. And then I'll find another interesting link, and I'll spend 30 minutes just sort of bouncing around with different thoughts that fuel my curiosity. And it's really kind of a fun thing to do. I actually do this for recreation. I rather enjoy doing it. Pick a topic that you're at least mildly interested in, and then just flex the curiosity a little bit. Now, why am I asking you to do that? Why am I making that suggestion? Because the idea is not about how much smarter you get in the 30 minutes hanging out on Wikipedia. The idea is, how do you build the curiosity muscle? How do you train yourself to want to know more? This is one of the reasons why I have such a big problem with the number of hours that we, and especially in the United States, dedicate to watching television. That television is stuff that somebody else dictates what's going to put into your brain. No, you take the charge. You take control of that. You determine what you're going to put in your brain. Get curious. Get curious about how you get to know your own customer. Get curious about your industry. Get curious about the world. It's a good life skill. Well, we appreciate you listening to the podcast. We appreciate you getting the word out there and letting other people know about the podcast as well. If you consider posting a link on your social media page, we would really, really appreciate it. But that's our wrap on our podcast today. Hope you enjoyed it. You can find everything you're looking for at jeffshore.com. Until next time, go out there and change someone's world.